You didn't just sleep with your father, you made his baby! You're the villain!
I still remember the day Francine and I exchanged vows. It felt like a dream coming true, though deep down, I sensed our connection wasn't as strong as I had hoped. We were young, ambitious, and driven by different desires. While I longed for a close family, Francine seemed focused on her career and her father's approval. Life moved fast after our wedding. Less than 7 months later, we welcomed our daughter, Chelsea. I was ecstatic, ready to embrace fatherhood. But something felt off. Francine's enthusiasm for motherhood seemed strained, almost like she viewed it as an inconvenience rather than a blessing. Whenever I gently brought up my concerns, she would attribute her mood to postpartum blues, brushing it off as temporary. I accepted her explanation, and we settled into our little domestic life, like many young, upwardly mobile parents in the modern world. I left each day to earn a living for the family while Francine stayed home, taking on the role of caregiver. Or so I thought. Without consulting me, Francine hired a nanny. When I questioned her about the unfamiliar woman I had seen leaving our condo as I returned from work one day, Francine brushed it off, as though it was already a done deal. Given her social standing and professional ambitions, she couldn't let having a child interfere with her career. Just 2 months after Chelsea was born, Francine went back to work. Even though we both worked for her father, she insisted on driving herself to the office, wanting to maintain the appearance of independence despite her new roles as wife and mother. "Business needs me," she explained, "and my father is relying on me." Meanwhile, Alicia hardly seemed to be around whenever I was. It was as if every time there was a family gathering at the Thompsons where I could potentially be with Francine, Alicia conveniently had other plans. While I still had lingering feelings for my wife's younger sister, my sense of duty to Francine and our family began to overshadow those emotions. Alicia's absence, mostly due to her college commitments — yes, she was at Scott — seemed to leave Francine unfazed. And when Alicia was present, her demeanor toward me, her parents, and even Francine was cold, bordering on openly hostile. No, there was no chance I was going to be friended by Alicia on Facebook anytime soon. Marriage tends to fall into a predictable rhythm over time, with couples settling into routines and creating the house rules that bring harmony to their homes. Francine and I were no different. However, in our case, it became clear that the household rules were whatever Francine decided they should be. To keep the peace, I quickly learned that my best option was to go along with whatever she wanted. Occasionally, I could win small battles on trivial matters, but when it came to big decisions, like our social circle, finances, or how often we went out, it was always Francine's call. I preferred a smooth, conflict-free life, so I kept quiet, avoiding confrontation. It also became apparent early on that Francine wasn't keen on having more children, as our intimacy dwindled to once a week, then every 2 weeks. When it came to intimacy, she stuck to the same old routine and no interest in BJ. As for contraception, she insisted on protection, claiming that birth control pills and implants didn't agree with her. What I didn't know at the time was that she was still very active in bed, but not with me. About 1.5 years after we got married, I noticed Stedman Carstairs around the office. Francine casually mentioned that he had completed his MBA at Harvard and was now working with a Boston firm. He would be visiting frequently, handling clients in our region. I didn't trust the guy, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to risk a confrontation, even if it seemed like he was getting uncomfortably close to my wife. A little over 2 years later, our second daughter, Grace Ann, was born. Francine wasn't thrilled about being pregnant again, blaming me for poor quality protection, but she adjusted. She showered Gracie with motherly love, just like she did with Chelsea. But I couldn't help but feel that her attention was always more for the kids than for me. Still, I gave both girls all the love I could, and they grew closer to me as they got older, despite their cooler relationship with their mother. By the time the girls were in school, something felt off in our marriage, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. The sudden jolt of the plane woke me from my nap. I'd missed the beverage cart, and now the flight attendants were struggling with it. One gentleman had been burned by spilled coffee, and the attendants were trying to clean it up when the first-class attendant hurried forward, whispering urgently to them. She quickly went back to the front of the plane, and a calm, authoritative voice came through the speakers, reassuring us that we were experiencing turbulence. I tightened my seatbelt, trying to feel at ease as the plane rocked again. As the economy faltered, my job became more demanding. I had to work longer hours to keep my clients happy, constantly monitoring the markets. But in my marriage, I had no idea how much trouble I was actually in. While I worked hard to hold my position, Francine's career seemed to be picking up. She was traveling often, and when she wasn't, she was going out with her girls from work. Though I had no proof, I suspected there was more going on during those nights out than just harmless fun. But I was too passive to confront her. I was also too afraid of the fallout. A divorce would mean losing access to my kids, financial instability, and worst of all, no love. But eventually, that's exactly what happened. The economy didn't recover as quickly as expected, and I kept working hard to stay afloat. I was doing everything I could to keep both my career and my family intact, unaware that I was already losing both. One day, I was called into my father-in-law's office. To my surprise, Francine was there, along with her lawyer and another woman, who looked like she had just stepped out of a reality TV show. The woman stepped forward and, with a smirk, served me with papers, snapping a picture as she did. I was still trying to process what was happening when Francine tearfully asked, "How could you?" Then the lawyer clarified everything. He claimed that I had coerced a young woman from my department into intimacy multiple times, a serious accusation that violated not only my marriage, but also company policy. To make matters worse, Francine's father was now accusing me of breaking our prenuptial agreement. I stood there stunned as the lawyer warned me about the legal consequences, including the possibility of prosecution for labor law violations. My world had just collapsed. I was in a daze. I had no idea who Joan Hartman was or why this was happening to me. I was blindsided, confused, and for the first time in years, truly angry. But true to form, I just kept quiet and let it happen. Thompson didn't let up. "You've got 30 minutes to gather your things. Your access to the network has been revoked, and these men will take your keys and parking swipe card," he said, with a cold finality. Before I could respond, Francine interrupted. "Your stuff is packed and waiting at the condo. The locks have been changed. You can pick it up tonight before 8 p.m. I finally found my voice. "The girls—" "They're staying with my mother," she cut me off. "I filed for a restraining order. I'm afraid of what you might do, given your history." My temper flared. "What history? What do you mean, violent nature? I've never laid a hand on you or the kids." Thompson smirked. "See, Jim?" he said to his lawyer. "If you need a witness about his anger, just call me." I realized then I was trapped. These professionals had orchestrated everything. Shocked, defeated, I was escorted out by security, feeling like a stranger in my own life. That evening, as I drove toward my parents' house, I was seething. My car was packed with the remnants of my life. My office box, a few clothes, toiletries, and the harsh reality hit me. I had been set up, and now I was left in the dust. I replayed the events over and over in my mind. They had found someone to lie, probably blackmailed or threatened her, and framed me for harassment. The adultery accusations were designed to trigger the prenup. But the restraining order? That part was still a mystery, but I could only guess that Francine was using this to turn the girls against me. 2 weeks passed, and I hadn't heard from my daughters. Most of our friends had cut ties, some even suggesting violence against me over the supposed infidelity. It felt like I was completely alone. Then one night, over drinks, Ted Stafford finally spilled the truth. He hesitated at first, but after some prodding, he dropped the bomb. "Lou, you're not going to like this, but Francine moved in Stedman Carstairs. He's living with her, and your girls." My stomach sank. It was him. Carstairs. The same guy who had always been around, the one Francine never really got over. He had moved back to Decatur, divorced, and now he was my replacement. Ted told me that Carstairs had never fully let go of Francine, after all. He had only left her when I got her pregnant, and when he returned, he was free to pick up where they'd left off. I couldn't believe it. But as Ted filled in more details, it all started making sense. Carstairs and Francine had always had unfinished business. She had only used me to solve her pregnancy problem, and now, with Carstairs available again, I was out of the picture. My only role was to be the convenient pawn in their scheme. The worst part? Francine was even telling people that without Carstairs, she wouldn't have had her 2 girls. I felt the rage bubbling up, but I couldn't do anything. I had been living a lie for so long, and now the truth was slapping me in the face. My life had been controlled by them, and now I was powerless. The divorce was quick and brutal. I hired a cheap lawyer, but the odds were stacked against me. I was forced to keep paying for the condo where my girls still lived, while Francine was hailed as the nurturing mother. All the while, I was being painted as the guilty party, an unfaithful, neglectful husband. Child support was another hit. I had no problem paying for the girls, but Ted's words haunted me. The idea that I might not even be their biological father gnawed at me, even as I continued to pay. It was a cruel irony. I was still financially tied to them, but emotionally, I had been erased. The captain's voice came over the loudspeaker, interrupting the tense silence in the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some severe turbulence due to a storm front moving in from the Gulf of Mexico. It stretches from New Orleans to Little Rock and up toward Louisville, and it's right between us and Atlanta. Hartsfield-Jackson has grounded all flights, and the airport gates are full. We're being diverted to Nashville to wait out the storm," he continued, urging everyone to stay seated with seatbelts fastened and to follow crew instructions. It didn't help ease my nerves. The plane jerked and bounced, lightning flashing in the dark sky outside. I wasn't great with flying at the best of times, and this was pushing me to the edge. In a panic, I grabbed the small bracelet from my pocket, the one with the Nasib stone Mookie had given me, and slipped it onto my wrist. I found myself rubbing the stone anxiously as I muttered a prayer for a safe landing. Just then, the plane shuddered again as the captain began lowering the landing gear. My vision started to blur, but it wasn't constant. It was alternating between my left and right eye. My heart raced. I rubbed the stone harder, praying even more desperately. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, nothing felt right. I wasn't on the plane anymore. Instead, I was standing in a men's room in my old office building, the place I'd been fired from months ago. Looking into the mirror, I noticed something odd. My pupils kept fluctuating between dilated and tiny. I splashed water on my face to clear my head, and after a few seconds, my vision returned to normal. Confused and trying to make sense of it all, I saw a security guard who had escorted me out months ago. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He greeted me casually, as though nothing had changed, and I used the opportunity to slip out of the bathroom. The lobby TV was broadcasting a car chase in Houston, but what grabbed my attention was the date and time on the screen. It was almost a year ago. The early spring outside, with budding trees and green grass, matched the time exactly, but it should have been late November. As I tried to process everything, Marge, a receptionist, noticed my pale face and asked if I was okay. I gave a weak excuse about something I'd eaten and headed upstairs to my old office. Everything was exactly as it had been. The same desk, the same family photos. Seeing a picture of my late wife Alicia and my daughters brought back a wave of sadness. She had died earlier that year, and I'd never fully gotten over her. Then, my ex-father-in-law, J. Carter Thompson, walked in with a big grin. He congratulated me on landing the Allen Brothers deal, something that had happened months ago in the timeline I knew, after everything fell apart. The date on the TV, the early spring outside, all pointed to this being before my world crumbled. I looked down at my wrist and saw the Nasib stone bracelet, the same one I'd worn on a flight to Minneapolis months after this moment. Somehow, I had been sent back in time, to the period just before everything went wrong. It was like a chance to change things. I realized that if the dates were accurate, I was still months away from the collapse of my life. Maybe I could avoid the divorce, the job loss, and the betrayal. I grabbed a pen and began planning. I knew Francine was already seeing Stedman Carstairs, but this time I wouldn't be caught off guard. I had forewarning and anger on my side. I began gathering evidence of Thompson's shady dealings, setting up emergency funds, and making sure I had backup copies of critical files. Francine noticed and, as usual, grew suspicious. She was still the same controlling woman. But now, I had the upper hand. Closeness between us had always been strained, with her agreeing only once every 10 days and always insisting on a protection. That night, after dinner, I pointed out it had been over 2 weeks since we'd had love. She reluctantly agreed, but I overheard her on the phone with someone. Probably Stedman. I knew then that our marriage was over, but I wasn't angry, just resigned. During intimacy that night, I took control for the first time in years. I didn't use a protection and I felt empowered. But then she called out another name, Studman. It was all I needed to confirm her betrayal. My anger flared, but I used it to fuel my actions. The more I thought about her with Stedman, the more I lost control. When it was over, I acted like everything was fine. But inside, I knew it was the last time I'd be deceived by her. The next day, I took action. I'd been preparing for the inevitable divorce and knew I had to fight back this time. I'd already gathered evidence that Joan Hartman, the woman who had perjured herself against me, had worked for Thompson's company. I had the documents, the proof, and a lawyer who was ready to back me up. When the confrontation came, I walked into Thompson's office with my lawyer by my side, refusing to go in without him. Inside, Thompson was furious, but I stood my ground. I wasn't the meek man I once was. I wasn't going down quietly this time. The shock on their faces was palpable. This wasn't the same Lou Chandler they thought they knew. I was in control now, and I wasn't leaving without a fight. J. Carter Thompson was no novice when it came to business, and his reputation as a top negotiator was hard-earned. He had a knack for sensing when someone would resist, and he adjusted his approach accordingly. "Chandler," Thompson started, trying to sound reasonable, "we both know your secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. With all the company's security measures, we were bound to find out." He likely thought I'd fold like I had before, but this time, I wasn't backing down. "Mr. London stays," I said calmly, but with resolve. I wasn't one to cause a scene, but I knew this time I had to stand firm. The room fell silent. Thompson, his lawyer, and Francine exchanged glances, and after a pause, Thompson gave a reluctant nod. "Fine," he said, signaling for the woman holding an envelope to step forward. "Mr. Lewis Chandler?" she asked in a formal tone. "That's me," I replied, steady and unflinching. She handed me the envelope. I didn't hesitate, passing it directly to my lawyer, John London. "My client has no comment at this time," John said, opening the envelope with practiced precision. He quickly skimmed through the documents as if they were meaningless, then sealed it back in his briefcase. "We'll take the necessary time to review these," John added, his voice calm before turning to the opposition. "Anything else?" Francine, still icy, looked at me, her voice softer now. "How could you do this to me?" I focused on Thompson's lawyer as he raised a piece of paper. "Mr. Chandler," he began, "I have a deposition from Joan Hartman, a former employee under your supervision. She claims you coerced her into intimacy several times." I could see John's subtle reaction, but I gave him a quick signal to stay composed. He nodded, adjusting his focus back to the conversation. "You, Mr. Chandler, are guilty of adultery, violating your prenup with Francine, and breaching company policies about inappropriate relationships with subordinates." Thompson, studying my reaction, seemed to expect me to crack, but I stayed calm. My expression was stone. "The fact that Mr. Thompson isn't pressing criminal charges for labor law violations should be seen as a favor," the lawyer added, trying to provoke me. But I didn't react. I remained silent, allowing John to handle it. "As stated, my client has no comment," John repeated with authority. Frustrated, Francine added, "I've filed for a restraining order. I'm worried about your violent tendencies. Stay away from me and the kids." The lawyer handed me another document, which I passed to John. No outbursts, no anger. I simply stood there, calm and composed. "Okay," I said quietly, though inside I was resolute. Thompson, baffled by my lack of reaction, looked unsure of how to proceed. After a moment, he finally ordered, "Get him out of my office, now." A small, ironic smile crossed my face as security guards moved toward me. John stepped in front of them. "If you touch my client," he warned, "you'll face attack charges before you know it." The guards hesitated, looking to Thompson for guidance. After a brief moment, they backed off. John and I walked out, flanked by the security guards. Outside, John turned to me. "That was close. Could have gone a lot worse in there." I loaded my belongings into the trunk of my car and turned to face him. "The marriage was a joke," I said. "But the kids, I'm not sure how this restraining order will play out." John nodded. "Don't worry. I'll get that overturned quickly. But about Joan Hartman," I smirked, knowing what he was getting at. "John, you've seen the file. It's all fabricated. They're trying to use it against me, but I'll turn it around to my advantage." John raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "You're going to use this against them?" "Absolutely," I said, climbing into my car. "And this is just the start." I shot him a grin. "You're going to make me a very rich man with this wrongful termination lawsuit. You'll do pretty well, too, on contingency. Once the divorce is final, we'll go after them for $16 million in damages. $1 million for each year I've been with Thompson, and the same for Hartman's years not with the company. Then we bump it up by $2 million and threaten perjury charges if they try to countersue. Each time they try to settle for less, we raise it by $500,000. John grinned. "The final payout won't be that high. Judges rarely award that much. But we've got solid evidence, and Thompson's arrogance will work in our favor. We'll still make a liquidating." We shook hands before parting ways, John heading to his car and me to my new place. The apartment in Sandy Springs was a huge upgrade from my previous one. I had planned ahead, covering the costs and deposits for the time being. As for the stuff in the condo, I get it myself. No reason to let Francine think I was desperate. The girls? I knew Francine would use my love for them against me, but for now, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't shake the thought about my biological connection to them, but that didn't matter. Chelsea and Gracie were my daughters, no matter who their real father was. I loved them, and nothing would change that. Driving through the streets, I tuned into the local news talk station. Rush was on, and I couldn't help but laugh, more out of relief than amusement, as the day's drama came to a close. The judge's gavel came down. "Divorce granted," he announced, wrapping up months of hearings and paperwork. John and I were there for the final moment. Francine's lawyer had to show up, despite the routine nature of the hearing. John nodded toward a deputy in the back, who walked up to Francine's attorney, James Cantrell. "You're Mr. James Cantrell, representing Miss Francine Chandler and Mr. J. Carter Thompson?" the deputy asked. Cantrell, clearly irritated, confirmed, "Yes, I am." The deputy handed him a packet. "Then you've been served," he said, walking off. John and I watched as Cantrell's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he scanned the documents. His face flushed with anger, and he turned to us, shaking the papers. "This is insane! This suit won't hold up!" Cantrell sputtered, but his hands trembled as he held the wrongful termination petition. John handed him a second packet. "You should read these first," he said with cool authority. As Cantrell flipped through the documents, it became clear he was unraveling. The facts didn't line up. Joan Hartman hadn't worked at Thompson when I did. She had left long before I even joined the company. Cantrell realized the documents had been falsified. His composure cracked, and he muttered, "We'll get back to you." John flashed a predatory smile. "Don't take too long. Have your PA call mine to set up a meeting." Before we left, I handed Cantrell a DVD-R with copies of documents that exposed years of illegal activities at Thompson Corporation. "Make sure Mr. Thompson gets this. Only him, not you. It might speed things up." John grabbed my arm as we stepped into the hallway, furious. "What the hell was that? You're risking the whole case with that stunt." I winced. Thompson's been running a crooked operation for years. I'm just giving him some incentive to settle. If not, I'll take it to the DA or the FBI. John was furious. "That's my job, not yours." "You know," I replied, "if you'd read it, or if Cantrell did, you'd be obligated to report it to the DA. You're an officer of the court." John didn't like it, but he knew I was right. After a few moments, he calmed down. "All right, it's lunchtime. We're going to Sonny's, and you're paying." We walked out, both of us eager for a good meal and the next phase of my plan. A few weeks later, Thompson struck back. Two men showed up late one evening after I'd taken out the trash at my new apartment. They didn't belong here. There was something off about them. When one of them asked for directions to apartment 106D, I realized they were after my place. They weren't just lost. They were armed. They meant business. As I fumbled for my car keys, panic set in. I dialed John, but it went to voicemail. Then, before I could react, bang, a bullet slammed into my windshield. They were shooting at me. I barely managed to get the car moving, but when I hit the automatic gate, it slowed me down. Thumps sounded from the back of my car, and more cracks appeared in the rear window. My phone fell between the seat and the console, but I couldn't take my eyes off the road. I made it a few blocks before the car just died. One of the bastards must have hit something vital. Panic set in. I couldn't waste time fishing around for my phone. I bolted from the car, running into a nearby wooded lot, hoping to lose them. But as I heard a car engine rev up in pursuit, I knew they were after me. I sprinted deeper into the woods, but then I hit a dead end, a security fence. I was trapped. Heart pounding, I thought I was done for. Then I saw it, the Nasib stone bracelet on my wrist. Could it work again? Could I really rely on this strange superstition? With the two thugs closing in, I had no choice but to try. I rubbed the stone hard. Within seconds, my vision distorted, flickering between clear and out of focus. I could hear their footsteps approaching. Just as they were about to spot me, a strange voice broke through. "Louis, what's wrong with your eyes?" Francine's voice broke the confusion. Suddenly, instead of hiding from two gunmen, I was back in bed with my wife. We had just finished having closeness, and I was catching my breath. Francine was already dressing, not a hint of affection left between us. She mumbled something about me not waking Chelsea, which struck me as odd. Where was Gracie? Could this be before she was born? My mind raced. This was around a year and a half after we'd gotten married. It had to be. I couldn't help but feel disgusted as I got up to clean myself off. The protection was still on me. As I flushed it, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. How controlled I'd been by Francine and her father. how I had let them dictate my life. Then, there was the Nasib stone. It had brought me back to this moment, but why? The memories were clearer now, and I was starting to realize just how much I had been manipulated in my previous life. I wasn't going to let things unfold the same way again. The first morning back, I kissed Chelsea, feeling a lump in my throat. Then I kissed Francine on the cheek as she prepared to leave for work. After that, I went to the office. The first thing I did was call IT for help logging into the network. My password had faded after so many years. Once I got access, I dove into the business at hand, collecting evidence on Thompson's shady dealings. This time, I wasn't going to be caught off guard. I had learned from the past, and I was ready to fight back. During lunch, I transferred the DVD-R containing my electronic evidence against Thompson and opened a new bank account. Separate from the one Francine and I had shared, I secured a safe deposit box for the evidence, moved a few $100s into the account, and started planning my financial independence. However, my focus had to be on breaking free from Thompson first. I created a safety net against him before dealing with my failing marriage. In a previous life, I had learned to make aggressive investments, particularly in volatile commodities through call options, multiplying my returns. The risk was high, but so were the rewards, especially with my knowledge of upcoming events and how they would affect the market. I'd never had the courage to do this before, but now I felt confident. This was my chance to play in the big leagues of finance. So I called a young, ambitious broker at a local investment firm and set up an account. We agreed on a contingency fund, and by lunchtime I was signing paperwork and transferring funds to begin my new venture. I also met his eager supervisor, who was looking forward to his cut of my success. The next thing I focused on was Alicia. I had to ensure she didn't fall victim to her family's plans, especially not to Frank Deal, the abusive guy her family would soon try to pair her with. Alicia had a health risk that she wasn't yet aware of, genetically linked cervical cancer. It was essential I warned her, even if our relationship was strained. I found her at the campus coffee shop and approached cautiously. "Alicia," I started, sitting across from her. "I'm not here to argue." "Then what do you want?" she snapped, clearly irritated. I took a deep breath. "Listen, this is important. You need to get tested for cervical cancer. Francine found out she has a genetic predisposition to it. I thought you should know." Alicia glared at me. "Why should I listen to you?" "Not for me. Do it for yourself. Don't you want to live a long life?" She didn't respond, just turned her face away. I took that as a sign she might still care, however faintly. I stood up to leave. "I love you, Alicia. I just wanted you to know that—" She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes seemed softer. A couple of weeks later, I moved on to the fourth item on my list. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Francine. "You want me to follow your wife?" Leon Atwater, the PI, asked, raising an eyebrow. "You think she's cheating?" "I think she's with someone else," I said. "Stedman Carstairs, but I also want you to build a dossier on Frank Deal." "That's going to cost you," he warned. "I understand. Just get it done." Leon began gathering intel on Francine's whereabouts, especially when she was away on business. He also kept an eye on Frank Deal, whom I hoped to keep away from Alicia. A couple of months later, Leon sent me his report. It was clear that Francine had been spending significant time with Stedman Carstairs whenever he was in town, and there were intimate encounters during those times. That was one thing I didn't need confirmed. I'd seen enough already. As for Frank Deal, Leon's investigation revealed some unsettling things. He had a history of trouble, an arrest for pills possession, followed by cover-ups, and multiple incidents of alcohol-fueled violence. It was exactly what I feared. I thought about how to use this information. I called Leon. "Can you send a copy of the report on Carstairs to his father-in-law in Boston? But don't let him know where it came from." "You know this guy's connected, right?" Leon warned. "Yeah, I do, but think about it. What if Carstairs gets caught in the middle of this mess?" Leon chuckled. "Consider it done." I hung up, satisfied. Carstairs was about to face some serious consequences. Meanwhile, I'd be ready to confront Francine with the truth. I asked Leon to hold on to the report, knowing it wouldn't disrupt Thompson's plans with Alicia and Deal for another year or so. I hung up, feeling confident about how everything was falling into place. I even touched the Nasib stone on my bracelet, but didn't rub it. For once, I felt in control. I had the evidence to take down Thompson whenever needed, secured a plan to keep my wife's lovers at bay, and warned Alicia about her health risks. Life was finally on track. Until it wasn't. While in Chattanooga, I turned my phone back on after a long day of meetings. 6 missed calls from Leon. That wasn't normal. I dialed his number instead of checking voicemail. Thank God. Why don't you keep your phone on? Leon's voice was tense. Had meetings all afternoon. What's up? I asked, surprised by his agitation. You need to get your wife away from Carstairs for the next day or two, he said, his voice urgent. Why? That Southie bastard got the report you had me send him. Instead of dealing with Carstairs in Boston, he sent 2 guys to follow him to Atlanta. They're on the same flight. It lands in about an hour. Panic set in. If those 2 thugs arrived at the condo while I was still hours away, Francine and Chelsea could be in serious danger. I slammed the car into gear and sped toward I-75, calling my department's PA to leave a voicemail about a family emergency. I tried calling the condo, but either got no signal or voicemail. By the time I hit the perimeter near Galleria, I was already beyond frantic. Traffic was unbearable, and all I could think about was getting home. My love for Francine might be long gone, but she was still my wife, and Chelsea was my daughter. I couldn't let them get caught in the crossfire. I didn't get to my condo until after 7:30. A rental car was parked in my spot next to Francine's. It had to be Carstairs. Instead of charging up to the condo, I called her again. This time she picked up. Francine, listen carefully, I said, my voice more forceful than I'd ever used before with her. Get Chelsea and leave. Right now. What's going on? Her voice was cold, but I could tell she was shaken. There are 2 men coming for Stedman. Bad men. Get Chelsea and go to your mother's now, I said, trying not to panic. But Louis, just do it. No questions. I don't care what happens to Carstairs, but I want you and Chelsea safe. Do you hear me? A long pause. Then for the first time ever, she meekly answered, Yes, Louis. I didn't even mention that I was downstairs. I just needed to stay out of sight. I watched as Stedman sprinted to his rental and drove off. Finally, I breathed a bit easier, but not fully. Francine and Chelsea still weren't out of the building. Moments later, another rental pulled into my spot. 2 large men stepped out, scanning the area. They were here. I yanked the tire iron from my trunk and threw it at the men's rental, shattering the rear window. I yelled, Looking for me, you Mick bastards? They whipped out Colts, but I was already running. I glanced over my shoulder as they gave chase, then turned a corner, hoping to lose them. Just as I rounded the next block, I saw Francine's Subaru speeding past. She must have seen the danger and taken off without noticing me. I ducked into a nearby alley and hid behind a dumpster, waiting for the thugs to pass. My heart was pounding as I listened to their footsteps echoing behind me. The pungent mix of coffee grounds, eggshells, used cat litter, and carrot peels filled the air, but I couldn't care less about the smell. I was too focused on calming my ragged breathing. Then I heard them. 2 men moving among the dumpsters, methodically sliding open each lid. They must have figured that was the only place to hide. Panic set in. The only thing I could think to do was rub that damn stone. No, blessed stone. I needed it to work. Fast. Frantically, I gripped it, hoping it would get me out of this mess. The footsteps grew louder. I didn't want to die, especially not because someone thought I was Stedman Carstairs. The darkness inside the dumpster made it impossible to tell if the eye-dimming was happening. I couldn't even see my own hand. Then the lid nearest me slid open, and my heart nearly stopped. Alicia threw herself into my arms the moment she saw me, giving me a big, passionate kiss. Oh, sweetheart, thank you. This trip means so much to me, and I just know Daddy will say yes if you support me when I ask him, she said, her eyes full of hope. Are you okay? Your eyes look weird. I kissed her again, trying to gather my thoughts. It took a moment, but I realized where I was. This was right after the spring dance at her senior year, just a few weeks before her father's warning to stay away from her. Yet here we were, and despite his objections, Alicia and I had continued to grow closer, our bond deepening. In the timeline I remembered, I had been a coward when it came to standing up to her father, J. Carter Thompson, but this time I was determined to do better. This was the meeting where Alicia was asking her father for permission to volunteer in Africa over the summer. I had promised to support her, but last time I had caved. This time I was not going to let her father dictate her future. As we entered Thompson's office, he greeted Alicia warmly, but when his gaze shifted to me, the smile disappeared, replaced by a protective glare. Well, sweetheart, he said, turning back to Alicia. What brings you here today? Daddy, she began sweetly. I know you said you didn't want me going to Africa, but this trip is so important. The people there need help, and I need to know if I can go. Please. Her tone was sweet, but I could tell she was laying on the charm. Thompson's expression hardened. But what if something happens to you over there? Africa's dangerous. Alicia was ready. I've checked everything, CIA and State Department reports. Kenya is safer than downtown Atlanta at night. Thompson was tough with everyone, but he couldn't resist his daughters. He turned to me, trying to make me the bad guy. "What do you think, Chandler?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. This time, I didn't hesitate. "I think it's a great opportunity for Alicia. It'll help her grow personally and contribute to a worthy cause. How could she not benefit from such an experience?" Thompson looked taken aback, his anger barely hidden. Alicia, on the other hand, looked at me with admiration. I had done it, stood up for her. I finished calmly. She should go. Alicia squealed with delight and hugged me tightly. Thompson scowled, but I didn't care. It felt good to be the one supporting her for once. After she left, there was a brief but heated conversation with Thompson, who wasn't thrilled with my answer. He lectured me for about 5 minutes before shooing me out with a warning not to cross him again. Alicia had just returned from Kenya, and when I met her at the airport, she looked incredible, even after a 27-hour journey. After a quick hug with her mom, Alicia kissed me passionately, making Mrs. Thompson shift uncomfortably as she watched. Alicia told me about her time in Kenya, where she had worked with Doctors Without Borders, helping women fleeing from genital mutilation. She showed me a pendant she'd received from a Kenyan woman she'd befriended. A beautiful stone she called a Bahati stone. It was similar to the Nasib stone I still wore on my bracelet. "Well," I said after a quick kiss, "you need to get home and catch up with your family, but once you're settled, we should get together for lunch or something." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Lunch? How about you come over for the weekend instead? I want to show you off to my family as my boyfriend. How does that sound?" I was floored. This was a repeat of an earlier disastrous situation in my other timeline, but I felt ready now. I would go, and I would fight for us. I wasn't going to let anything or anyone tear us apart this time. We would just have to see how things played out. Alicia had been trying to play the part of the supportive girlfriend all week, leading up to my visit to the Thompson house. But this time, I was prepared. I knew what Francine's game was, and I wasn't about to fall for it. I'd learned from the past, and I had no intention of letting myself get tangled up with the wrong sister. Not again. Alicia was the one I wanted, not Francine. I had no illusions about my feelings for Alicia. In another life, I might have been raising someone else's children, but not in this one. I would love them as an uncle, not as a father. That chapter was closed. I showed up at the Thompsons' house on Friday evening, feeling more confident than before. I had everything I needed for the weekend, right down to the Nasib stone bracelet on my wrist, just in case things got tricky. I didn't think I'd need it, but I wasn't taking any chances. Alicia was waiting for me when I pulled up, dashing outside to greet me with a big hug and a kiss. It was the kind of welcome that definitely wouldn't have been appropriate for a debutante in Stone Mountain society, but I didn't mind one bit. After a few quick hellos to her mother, Alicia led me upstairs, and within minutes we were sharing a kiss in the guest room. I'd arrived earlier than last time, so when Mr. Thompson and Francine showed up, the house was quieter. Mr. Thompson gave me a handshake, a quick acknowledgement, and that was that. Francine, as expected, threw me a few flirtatious glances, but I wasn't biting. Dinner was much like last time, with Alicia making it clear to her parents that I was her boyfriend. Mr. Thompson, predictably, wasn't happy about it. He thought it was inappropriate for an employee to be dating his daughter. Mrs. Thompson was caught in the middle, trying to support her daughter without completely disagreeing with her husband. Francine was quiet, except for the occasional request to pass something at the table. I decided to speak up. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I need you to know that I have strong feelings for Alicia," I said, making sure I had everyone's attention. "I think I'm in love with her, and while I know we can't make any big commitments until she finishes her education, I can see us spending our lives together." Alicia beamed at me, and I could see the Thompsons exchange a look. Francine's smile faltered just a bit. I could feel the tension building, but I held my ground. Mr. Thompson glanced at Francine, and she gave him a subtle nod. The conversation shifted again, and soon Mrs. Thompson suggested we move to the recreation room for after-dinner drinks. I could tell she was holding back. She had more to say, but she wasn't saying it. Francine, on the other hand, was watching me intently, her body language all but screaming for attention. As expected, Mr. Thompson excused himself to get some rest for his golf game in the morning. He gave Francine another pointed look before leaving. She poured drinks for everyone, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was adding something to mine, just like last time. She handed me my glass with a smile that seemed a little too knowing, but I pretended to drink it. I was watching the clock, waiting for the familiar sensation of something taking effect. Sure enough, About 15 minutes later, I started to feel it. Wow, I said, setting the empty glass down and trying to act as though I was fading. I don't feel so well. I think I need to go to bed. Alicia and Francine helped me upstairs, and I let myself go limp, just like last time, hoping to keep up the ruse. Once in the guest room, the two of them started undressing me. Alicia and Francine both in their own way, but I kept my eyes closed and stayed still. I wasn't sure who had touched me inappropriately, but I needed to stay in control. They covered me with a blanket, and I heard them leave the room whispering. After a few moments, I opened my eyes and checked my phone, nervous but ready. I quickly texted Alicia, hoping she would see it. I was waiting for a follow-up message, but instead, I heard the guest room door click open. A soft silhouette appeared in the doorway. It was Alicia. "Lou," she whispered. "What's going on?" Relief flooded through me. "Oh, thank God it's you," I whispered back as I pulled her into my arms. "Listen, baby, I need you to trust me. This is really important." She was frowning, but she was listening. "What is it? What's going on?" She didn't like being told what to do, but she was willing to hear me out. I took a deep breath. "Do you trust me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and serious. Alicia hesitated for just a moment before answering. "Okay, yes, I trust you. But you're scaring me a little. What do you need?" "Sweetheart," I said, "I need you to get into the closet and stay quiet. Please. I know this sounds weird, but just trust me. You'll understand soon enough." Alicia didn't immediately respond, but I could feel her body tense like she was about to argue. I pushed on. "We don't have much time. Just do it, okay?" After a moment of silence, she nodded and moved toward the closet. I could hear her breathing as she crouched down inside. I hoped I was right about what was going to happen next. Alicia didn't say anything, but if I were her, I'd think my boyfriend had lost it. Still, she came over, hugged me, and said, "Louis, you're the craziest boyfriend ever," and sighed. "But I love you enough to let you show me whatever you think I need to see, even if it sounds completely nuts." I led her to the closet, opened the door, and moved a chair inside. "This should give you somewhere to sit in case this takes longer than I expect." "Are you sure about this, Lou?" she asked, still unsure. "Honey, trust me. You're going to see something in the next hour or two that will surprise you. Something that could change everything for us. If you care about us, we have to go through this." I paused, hoping she'd understand. "Do you want to risk everything for the sake of one weekend?" "No, I don't want that," she replied, giving me another hug. "I'm with you. I'll stay quiet." "Thank you. Please stay quiet no matter what happens. You need to see this to understand why I'm doing this. Can I count on you to stay in there until I say otherwise?" She nodded in the dark as I closed the closet door behind her, leaving her to sit in silence. The small amount of light through the louvered door wasn't enough for her to see much, but she'd hear everything. I climbed back into bed, covering myself up, trying to settle my nerves. The house was eerily still, and I knew it was only a matter of time before things played out the way they had before. But I was determined to make sure this time ended differently. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed under the covers. I quickly checked it, keeping the screen hidden. "Alicia, how long? Need 2 PB for too long." Me, "Can you hold on?" Alicia, "I'll try." 5 minutes passed, and the tension was unbearable. Then I heard the door creak open. I quickly turned my head, trying to stay still, expecting Francine to enter, but someone else followed her. It took me a second, but then I realized who it was. J. Carter Thompson, Alicia's father. I held my breath, praying Alicia wouldn't make a sound from the closet. "Are you sure he's out?" J. Carter whispered. "Yeah, Daddy, I sedated him enough to keep him out for hours. By the time he wakes up, I'll have had a couple hours of sleep," Francine answered, and they both chuckled. "We just need to time it right so Alicia wakes up and finds us together after a night of passion." I silently prayed that Alicia would stay quiet. I heard her take a sharp breath, but thankfully she stayed silent. "Yeah, well, this isn't exactly how I planned to fix this," Thompson muttered. "I know, Daddy," Francine replied, "but Stedman's been gone for over 2 months, and I'll be showing soon. We need to fix this now." That's when it hit me. Stedman Carstairs, the guy Francine had been involved with, hadn't been around for months. But the timing didn't match up with when Chelsea was born in the other timeline. The dates were off by a month. What was going on here? "Well, just play the adoring lover until the wedding, then the loving wife," Thompson said. "And maybe we can bring your sister into the fold eventually." What did that mean? "Don't worry, Daddy. I'm good at this. I fooled everyone at his old company before you bought them out. Francine responded, pride in her voice. Yeah, I remember, Thompson chuckled. Just be careful. I will, she answered. Once I have Louis trapped, we can get back to our usual routine. Frankie and her stud man. My heart stopped. What the hell? I was hearing the unthinkable. Francine wasn't just scheming with her father. She was planning to entrap me into some sick game. My anger exploded. I threw back the covers and shouted, You're her stud man! The lights flashed on, blinding us. I saw Francine standing by the light switch, her face filled with shock, while Thompson stood frozen for a second. Louis! Francine gasped, trying to think of a way out. But I was beyond caring at that point. It all hit me at once. J. Carter Thompson had an incestuous relationship with his own daughter, and she was pregnant. And now, he was planning to extend his twisted web to Alicia, my love. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Give it up, Francine! You witch! How could you do this to your own father? I shouted, rage flooding through me. And then get pregnant by him? Thompson didn't speak for a moment, likely trying to figure out a way to salvage the situation. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Let me guess. Once you couldn't get her married off, you decided to trap me? And now you're planning to go after Alicia too? I barely contained my disgust. You were even planning to worm your way into her bed, weren't you? Both of them knew they were cornered. But Thompson was a powerful man, and I knew he'd lash out. But Alicia beat him to it. You bastard! She screamed as she burst from the closet, slamming the door into the wall. Everyone in the house must have heard her. Mrs. Thompson was standing in the hallway watching as all the pieces of the sick puzzle fell into place. Alicia wasn't done. You slept with my sister, your own daughter, and got her pregnant? Her voice cracked. And you plan to try to do the same to me? What kind of monster are you? I moved to her side, ready to hold her back if needed. That's when I noticed Alicia was holding her Bahati stone pendant, nervously twisting it in her fingers. And you, she said to Francine, you're trying to ruin my relationship with Lou and trap him into a marriage to cover up what you've been doing with Dad. Before I could say anything more, 2 sharp shots rang out, making us all jump. J. Carter Thompson collapsed as if his body had been frozen in place, his hands still in the air. Francine stood there, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Alicia gripped her Bahati stone nervously, and I noticed her weakening, either from shock or the adrenaline wearing off. As I tried to steady her, I became aware of Mrs. Thompson entering the room, holding a tool. Panic hit me. She shot her husband. I quickly turned Alicia to shield her from the gruesome sight of her father bleeding on the floor. Mrs. Thompson shouted in anger, having just murdered her husband. The weight of the moment pressed down on us, but Alicia's eyes were locking onto mine, shifting in a way that I knew too well, her pupils dilating and constricting erratically. In a daze, I instinctively rubbed my own Nasib stone bracelet, a habit that calmed me. I heard 2 things in quick succession. Francine's voice, calling for her mother to stop, and Alicia asking, Louis, what's happening to your eyes? It was suddenly the middle of the afternoon. I was dressed in business casual, wearing a jacket, and Alicia was in a pink cocktail dress instead of her nightgown. We were no longer in the guest bedroom, but standing near a potted plant in the front hallway. I checked my wrist. My Nasib stone bracelet was still there. Alicia was still wearing her Bahati stone pendant. This was my Alicia, but everything around us felt wrong. We were at a party, the party where Alicia and I had first met. But something was off. She spoke to me like she already knew me. I tried to clear my mind as I noticed her pupils slowly stabilizing, just as mine had done before. Alicia? I asked, unsure of what was happening. Is it really you? She smiled and called me Sugar, but I saw the panic creeping into her eyes. She remembered what we'd just gone through in the other timeline. I quickly told her not to say anything and led her out to the patio, wanting to explain everything. There, I ordered us drinks, and I quietly told her about the power of her pendant. I showed her my Nasib stone bracelet, explaining how I had once doubted the power of these stones until they saved me. I promised I'd explain more later, but for now, we needed to escape the crowd. Before I could say more, Francine stepped onto the patio, furious. She scolded Alicia for drinking, but I interrupted. I told her I'd bought Alicia the drink and that she was legally an adult now. Francine, clearly unused to being challenged, told me to leave. But I refused. I told her that I was leaving, but Alicia was coming with me. Alicia, visibly angry, turned to me. You wait out front, Sugar. I'm going upstairs to pack, she said, not waiting for Francine's protests. I followed Mrs. Thompson as she spoke with a couple in the hallway. When they left, I approached her, introducing myself as Louis Chandler, and politely informing her that I needed to leave. She smiled politely, unaware of the storm brewing in her family. As I waited for Alicia, I thought about what had just happened. We were no longer trapped in a twisted nightmare. There was still much to uncover, but I had a plan for the future, and with Alicia by my side, I felt a sense of purpose. Alicia eventually appeared, dressed for the cold, avoiding contact with her parents. I smiled, offered to carry her bag, and kissed her passionately, knowing our lives were about to change for good. In the end, J. Carter Thompson was sentenced to 3 years for his business crimes after an anonymous tip led to an investigation. However, he died in prison during a riot, a victim of bad timing. Mrs. Thompson, devastated by her husband's actions, was eventually told about the offense her husband had inflicted on her daughters. Alicia informed her mother about Thompson's inappropriate advances on Francine, which shocked her deeply. Francine entered therapy for the trauma, and with time, began to heal. Meanwhile, Stedman Carstairs, now divorced, rekindled his relationship with Francine, and they were married. The child Francine was carrying this time was truly his. As for me, I started my own consulting firm, ensuring a steady future for Alicia and me. Despite the financial turmoil, Mrs. Thompson and Alicia were protected by trusts, and Alicia could still attend college. Though we had to wait until her senior year, we eventually married, ready to begin our new life together. I shared with Alicia the full story of my experiences across multiple alternate lives, all influenced by the Nasib stone. The most important revelation, however, was the genetic predisposition to certain cancers that ran through her family, passed down through the maternal side. This information proved crucial for both Alicia and her mother, Mrs. Thompson. After learning about Alicia's potential cancer risks, Mrs. Thompson arranged for an immediate medical checkup. Her doctor found an unusual issue with her ovaries and referred her to a gynecological oncologist. Thankfully, the growth they discovered was still in its early stages and was removed before it could turn dangerous. A couple of years later, Francine, after having 3 children with Stedman, 2 girls and a boy, opted for a hysterectomy. I often thought about how different her daughters were from the ones she had in another life with me. Through all of this, I learned 2 valuable lessons. First, that standing firm for the things that matter, family, doing right by others, and maintaining self-respect is essential. And second, well, that's another story. "Glenn, watch out for Stuart, you hear?" Alicia called as our younger 2 boys ran around the cemetery near my grandfather's grave at Fort Snelling. We were in Minnesota for a family wedding, and I had convinced Alicia to stop by and pay respects before we headed back south. Our 2 older boys, Thomas and Paul, were standing nearby, looking bored and ignoring the younger ones. We had 4 boys now, thanks to the decision Alicia and I had made, knowing about her genetic risks. After we married, we didn't waste any time. Just months after Alicia graduated from college, we had Thomas. 15 months later, Paul arrived, then Glenn 2 years after that. We'd almost given up hope of ever having a daughter, and then Stuart was born. Alicia eventually chose to have a hysterectomy to avoid cancer risks, and while we had some regret about not having a daughter, our boys brought us so much joy and adventure that it never really bothered us. As for the stones, Alicia's Bahati stone pendant and my Nasib stone bracelet are now stored away in a safe deposit box. We agreed that we had found our peaceful place and would focus on building a life together, without the supernatural distractions. Of course, we still argued, every couple does, but we always made sure to handle disagreements constructively, showing our boys how to argue without damaging the relationship. And we definitely didn't demonstrate to the kids how we celebrated making up afterward. That part was much too private. As we wrapped up our visit to the cemetery and headed back to the car, I noticed one of the cemetery workers. There was something familiar about him. He was black, but not African American. He looked more African, maybe Somali. When he passed by on a utility vehicle, I smiled to myself. Alicia asked me what was so amusing, and I just shrugged. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a random memory." She smiled at me warmly and reminded me of our old motto, "Focus." It was a phrase we'd repeated often in our first years together. "Yeah," I grinned, "focus. Keep your eyes on what really matters in life." And with that, we got into the car and headed home, ready to take on whatever came next.